Thank you, Kelly. That song was my talk. So. It's really, if you recognize that unity's third principle, is that thoughts and mind produce after their kind. Of course, we use the word mind, and just, I don't know in the 21st century we use that word as much. Maybe consciousness. Our consciousness is our prayer. It's our thoughts, it's our feelings, it's our beliefs, it's our history, it's all the stuff that comes up from our subconscious. Our whole consciousness is a prayer. So, let's be careful what's in our consciousness, right? And how do we inform our consciousness? Okay, I've jumped forward to our conclusion. Let me start at the beginning. This Sunday is called Evolution Weekend. And Jerry gratefully asked me to talk this weekend. I always appreciate that. And I thought, well, we've got Valentine's Day Friday, we've got President's Day, but we're going to sandwich in between evolution. It was a thing that a theologian, Michael Zimmerman, started years ago, to start a weekend specifically to say, because across the United States and across the world probably, but at least in our country, there's many places where they still teach creationism as if scientific knowledge and scientific it's sort of the knowledge that we get and the insights and the awareness from science is somehow against theology, against our spirituality, against our insights of the divine. And so this Sunday is to say, hey, let's be sure we understand that it is not in conflict. That actually science and what I like to call the book of nature, we have the book of scripture. We're going to open the book of scripture today. But also there's that book of nature and what it tells us and what it provides to us in this beautiful revelation of knowledge about ourselves as human beings and how we unfold. And so I don't want to go necessarily too far back and talk about evolution. We talk about evolution oftentimes as something that happened over the millions of years, 5 billion years of a planet evolving. All true, very exciting, very cool stuff to learn about, read about, maybe join me in that. But what I'm really interested in is evolution that's happening now, today, by us. Our consciousness is a prayer. Our consciousness outpictures our humanity and the power of our ability and our consciousness to outpicture reality. Not only as it changes our lives, but as it actually changes in the real world, is something very noticeable in science, and it is a spiritual principle of unity. Our thoughts, our prayers, this evolution, this evolutionary aspect is from us. Let me trace back, just not millions of years. Let me just go back 2 million. Not too far in Earth time. And we've had all this evolution of hominids and two-legged people, as I'll call them people. The Christ was with them, right? 2 million years ago, 4 million years ago. The Christ essence, the Christ presence, the divine presence in all life and all creatures. But here was this human. They came out 2 million years ago, not modern Homo sapien, but human-like. Already the Christ essence evolving inside them. Already the power of their ability to outpicture coming forward. I love this diagram. It's about humans co-creating. Because as we move forward, it wasn't just the evolutionary energy of the divine, of God, that was singing us forward into new creativity, new possibilities through evolutionary processes, but it was also the actual energy and the consciousness and the mind of humanity as it evolved, co-creating at the same time. You can think of that as unity's third principle, the principle of co-creation. And then we come forward to about, let's say 90,000 years ago. We're getting closer. The modern human, that Homo sapiens as we knew it. And then something really amazing happened. There was an ice age, and at the end of the ice age, go back about 10, 12,000 years, the ice receded. There was a flourishing of human beings that came forth. The stories of crossing the Bering Straits. And they call this time, it was the end of the ice age, it was the agricultural era, and it was also, we called it the geologic era, the Holocene era. An actual period where we said, this is something new on Earth. Something new has happened with this change in the ice age and this movement and this understanding of people that all of a sudden started getting into agriculture. And boy, did we touch the planet. We started domesticating animals, cows, sheep, dogs. I mean, this is an evolutionary process. We are changing species to work with us and to cooperate with us. I keep looking at the data for when cats were domesticated. I haven't seen it. Right? Yeah, the cat lovers are it's never in the data about cats. The dogs and the camels and the cows, all domesticated. But it's interesting, we come into the agriculture and we are really making an impact. The Holocene, we are touching the world. If you were somehow outside the world looking down, you'd see that evolutionary-wise, the planet Earth was changing. It was changing because there was these tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and then hundreds and hundreds of thousands of human beings expanding across the globe. And we had this huge expansion. Think of the 12 powers of people, from our imagination and our understanding and our, and our energy, our strength and our life-giving capabilities. And we came up with Christianity and Hebrew scripture and Egyptian philosophy and Greek philosophy and mathematics. I mean, it was an amazing time on earth. But what's interesting, and this is a piece we need to look at, even though there was this great expansion because of our humanness and our ability to outpicture what was in our consciousness and our understanding and our knowledge, there was unintended consequences. I was looking at this article about, it came from physics.org. So how many of you think I sit around and read physics.org? Oh yeah, thank you. Thanks, Joe. The power of Google went and looked for some things. So cool little article. But it was talking about, even in that period of evolution, these unintended consequences. And it talked about, and this is pages and pages of the things that happened that we caused in evolutionary and how it sort of came back to us. But there was a major epidemiological transition when the modern infectious diseases emerged. They came out of this period. It was the result of us moving out of hunter-gatherer stages into cities and in agriculture. We were in crowded conditions. We started handling domesticated animals. Pest species were attracted to human areas and so came in and interacted with us. And it shifted the numbers and kinds of pathogens in our world. Of course, I'm thinking of the coronavirus that's going on right now. The signatures of these profound changes can be seen today in the human genome, with more than 86% of all present-day diseases for people, Europeans and African Americans, came from that shift when we moved from the prehistoric time into the agricultural period. 86% of all the diseases, smallpox and measles and all these things, they didn't exist for those people. It was an unintended consequence of our evolution, of our change, of our progress, if you will, into these new stages. So fast forward, if the agricultural-ish period changed that much, imagine what happened 300 years ago into the industrial age. And all of a sudden, things got going evolutionary-wise a lot quicker. Our interface with the world and our interface because of technology and actual ability of our imagination and our understanding of our, basically intelligence to interface with the world, to take coal and put carbon in the air and to do all the kinds of things. We started manipulating the earth, and both for the positive and sometimes, again, unintended consequences in huge ways. As a matter of fact, if you were to look down at the world, if you could somehow sit above it, in the Holocene era, you could see an obvious change. Scientists, of about 300 years ago with the Industrial Revolution, said we are in a whole new era again. They call it the Anthropocene, meaning the era of humans. In other words, our capacity to change the planet evolutionary-wise is immense, to the point where if you were to look at our Earth, Mother Earth right now, it looks like this co-created place where so many animals and creatures and events and the structures all work in conjunction with human beings. We're making sort of an Earth planet, if you will, the Anthropocene, the evolution caused by people. And if that's not enough, 60 years ago, we entered a whole new era, the technological revolution, where things sped up and got going even quicker. And unfortunately, just like in the agricultural period where there was unintended consequences, moving into this new era, we've had some unintended consequences. There's a piece called, and it's funny, I don't know how many of you have been to the film festival, Ball and seen it? Oh, lots of us, right? Have you noticed, like me, I love the film festival and I go every year. But I sometimes get to the point of, you cannot throw another devastating problem at me without giving me a solution. Because it creates anxiety. And scientists say right now that 1 out of 3 young teenagers suffers from some level of anxiety around the state of the world today. 1 out of 3. These are the messages from that, and I'm not, the science is true, and there is things a little bit to be anxious about. But we're not going to end this talk on a down note, I promise. Actually, it's going to be great. One of the things the scientists said that, and this is from an article I got from the Washington Post that came out last week. As climate change, and this is one issue, and there's more than just climate issues, but as climate change continues to unabashed parents and teachers and medical professionals across the country are finding themselves face to face with a quandary. How are you going to raise a generation of children to look forward to the future with hope when all around them constantly swirls a message of apparent hopelessness? How do you prepare your children of today for a world defined by environmental trauma? How do you find the line between responsible education and alarmism? They coined the terms of psychologists eco-anxiety and climate depression, the young people. And we see young people in the streets. Good for them. But there's more to the story. And there's no one single cause. And by the way, it's not just the climate. There was a study that looks at 9 key indicators of our planet's health. And this is since the Holocene, right? Since the last ice age. And people say, well, the climate and the weather, things have gone crazy over the last, before on planet Earth. Oh, that's true. But not in the Holocene. Not since we were here, and there's 7 billion of us here. It's been a pretty nice environment for humans to grow. And of 9 key indicators, 3 of them now are out of whack. The carbon in the air, the climate issues, the nitrogen regeneration cycle with not enough nitrogen, and one more, or maybe I can give you 2. I'll think of the other one. But there's some things that are good. The water, fresh water, and there's many more that are working well. But the emphasis, doctors say, and this is from the article, should be on personal responsibility and on empowerment. For an overwhelming problem like the climate issues, being able to take some action, whether that's eating less meat or switching to an electric vehicle or working on our consciousness, can help fight paralysis and get patients to recognize the worst of climate change is not a fait accompli, and progress can be made. He says the problem with people who get into this eco-anxiety is they're at one of 2 extremes. Either they're catastrophizing and saying we're doomed, that's the one extreme, or the other extreme that says, no, it's not happening, let's just stay in denial. These are the 2 extremes. And what he says is the healing place is you've got to recognize the middle space. You can go back and forth, but it creates a place, I love this, for you to think and feel in. Think and feel in, Unity's 3rd principle. What are we going to think and feel into? And out of that comes the innovative solutions. So there's our calling in this Evolution Weekend. How do we think and how do we feel into these areas that we think in this evolutionary process and in the consequences of our great technological evolution, these outfalls of some of the things that have infected the planet and affected us negatively? Well, let's deal with them. There was a guy, a Quaker, he's an activist, his name's George Lakey. And he was here in town the other week, and I known of him because he was my son Dominic's teacher. He was in a Quaker college back in Philadelphia. A big Quaker activist who just put out a book, and he's on tour, and he came to Nevada City, our big Quaker influence here. It is, actually, with our center, Friend Center. And he said, one of the problems is that every time another piece comes up on social media or on the news or another tweet or another anything, it distracts us. And so we're running over here to deal with this problem, then we're running over here to deal with this problem, and we're running around and we're reacting. He said that the solution is we need to just act, not react. Respond in a rational way. And he said this response comes by putting our attention like a laser beam. We don't need to do it all. we need to do something. Find it like a laser beam and stick with this. And then don't be distracted by the noise. Stay after it and move forward. But I want to add something into that comes from more of our spiritual tradition, if you will. Because it's not only responding in a focused way. He said not only does that get things done, but it's great for your mental health. You feel successful. You feel like you're moving. You feel like you're part of the solution. You see all the good. You recognize some unintended consequences, and we deal with them. And it brings a sense of profound release and mental, and it lowers mental health issues. And I think our children need that. So one thing I want to add to that, it's not just our focus like what we think is a good idea. From the very start, we talked about when we get our focus, it needs to be connected, our consciousness, with divine consciousness. Our sense of what needs to be done connected with our understanding of what God is asking us that needs to be done. We don't, it's like in the line. Oh, I see, that's my sugar aisle. Well, it's not. I need to open to the broader possibilities and let the divine energy, let Spirit talk to us. This comes from a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church in Philippi. Now, I want to set the stage just 1 second. He's not in a good place. He's in a Roman prison. Don't think of our jails. Think of a hole in the ground, dug out, dank, where he's already been in prison a few times. And at any moment, the guards can come in and beat you with a rod or a whip. They can do whatever they want. There's no law like we have it today. He was in a very precarious position and not sure what the Romans were going to do with him and the governor, and knowing he might even die. He had all the reason in the world to be as anxious as you could possibly imagine about his situation. But I want to read to you what Paul said. Actually, why don't you do this, if you wouldn't mind. Maybe we can lower the lights just for a second. If you wouldn't mind closing your outer eyes, I want to read this to you. Just relax for a second and feet on the ground. Take these words in from Paul when you think about things in our life and things going on around us that might be anxiety-provoking. Here's a call. It's the letter to the Philippians. Beloveds, do not worry. Don't fret. Instead of worrying, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers. Then let God know your concerns. And before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for the good, will come and settle you down. Read that again. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for the good will come and it'll settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when the Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. It is wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. And so I'll sum it up for you, my friends. I'd say you'll do best by filling your consciousness and meditating on things that are true, on things that are noble, things that are reputable, on the things that are authentic, on things that are compelling, on things that are gracious. Meditate on the best, not the worst. Meditate on the beautiful, not the ugly. Meditate on things to praise and not the worst. I'm taking another deep breath in. So when I think of the issues in the world today, we have a nice diagram up here. I say to myself, and by the way, in my professional life, I actually do a lot of work with climate issues, working for cities and counties and adaptation plans. But I stopped using the concept of climate change. If our thoughts are prayers, if what we think about our pictures, I don't want to be thinking about extreme change. So let's think about climate beauty, climate sustainability. Let's think about the climate and our world and our issues and the ways that are good and are true and are reputable and our authentic and our gracious and our compelling. Let's get our energy behind a world we can imagine in its beauty, in its transformativeness, in its truth, and not worry all of a sudden and put all our attention on what's wrong, what's on what's right. And the more I start thinking this way and trying to put my consciousness into, I know there's unintended consequences of this amazing transition of humanity on Earth. I know that. I'm not going to let it get us down, but rather, like a laser beam, let's pick something and let's focus on a world we want, on the world we need to go to, not getting caught up in worry and stress and depression. Let's do it for ourselves. Let's do it for our children, who obviously are needing to hear messages of hope. Now, we open the book of science and we hear about climate, we hear about the issues. Fine, love it. But let's not look at it from anxiety. Let's look at it like opportunity of what's the next step. And let's be sure we address it from a consciousness that's aligned with the divine picture of goodness, of truth, and of beauty. So I want to end with sort of an invitation. And I actually listened to Reverend Jerry's talk last year, Evolution Sunday as well, which I didn't even know there was such a thing as Evolution Sunday, but here we are, second year out. And he mentioned it, and I'm going to mention it again. And this is something I've been wanting to get involved with for a long time. It's called Unity's Earth Care Movement. And right now there's almost 50 Unity congregations across the country that have adopted a program called Unity Earth Care. Oh, I love that. Co-creating. And so after service, I'm going to first grab coffee. Joe taught me that one. Then I want to come up here, and anybody who's interested in finding a way to shine a laser, find a way, one way, that us as a congregation, because we're powerful in our minds that can transform the world, our individual minds, but oh man, when we put us together, when we raise common consciousness, and we work as a community, it's really powerful. And so this is a thing where we work as a congregation to look at things of our congregation for a way to look at earth health and greening, and in ways we can look at science and invite it into our lives and say, great, not something to worry about, an opportunity to change for a future that we can imagine that's even better. So after service, grab a coffee, whatever. Anybody interested in Earth Care Movement? It's a unity movement. I can tell you more about it. Feel free to meet me up front. Blessings. Happy Evolution Sunday.